Four teams Monday through Thursday. Today is the Big 12 North. And, you know, every pod has got a story to tell. In the North, of course, you've got Iowa State, Kansas State. They're right in the middle of still trying to be in the run just behind BYU and Colorado. But then again, you also have in the North Kansas, which is had themselves quite the struggle, and West Virginia, who we just had with Tony Caridi. Let's start with Iowa State, back-to-back losses, and things were rolling, and now all of a sudden you got to wonder where they're going to end up.
Yeah, they've got probably a confidence problem right now. I mean, after that Texas Tech loss, Kansas took it to them. I mean, the Iowa State chipped away and almost made it a game, but then made some mistakes at the end. Jalen Daniels looked like the Jalen Daniels we remember.
Yep.
He's finally starting to look like that. Kansas fans I know everywhere are going, buddy, where you been? What's been going on? So Kansas, you know, notwithstanding, look, they just have to put their heads down and finish 10-2. Just go win and then see what happens. That's the only thing they can do.
Okay, we're talking Iowa State. Though.
Yeah, no, I said that's what I said.
Okay,
I said that Kansas lost notwithstanding. They just go finish 10-2. Yeah, Kansas couldn't finish 10-2. No. That's not what I said. Yeah, Kansas notwithstanding, and what happened there, they got to move on. So.
Y'all know how many times Iowa State's finished 10 in anything?
None.
0.
Yeah.
They've never won 10 games ever.
None.
Not a single time. Not bowl games, not anything. So that's still doable if they win out or win 3 out of 4 because they're obviously going to go to a bowl game, but they're not going to the playoff. That's for damn sure now. They're eliminated from that. They're out of control when it comes to the Big 12 championship game. So they've relinquished the pretty strong hold they had at the top in these last 2 weeks, as I just think injuries have caught up with them. They've been an issue all year long, but I think you look at certain parts of that team, especially like linebacker, and they've just been riddled. And you've got guys out there playing who are not your best or still learning on the job or worn down or don't have great depth or whatever the case may be. I think
all
they've
the
just
above, yeah.
been a beat-up team. And I don't think that, you know, they've lost the faith or anything like that. I just think they've taken a couple of lumps, and now it's all about how you respond to it because the 10 wins is still out there, and that would be a massive deal for this football team to accomplish something nobody else has ever done. But that's being optimistic. On the pessimistic side, like, that does feel like Iowa State is going back to being kind of Iowa State, right? Like reverting to the norm of here you are, and you're like, man, 7-0, and this is the year. Like, we're finally going to bust through that wall, and then these last couple of weeks happen, unfortunately. So the big, grander hopes are off the table, but, you know, they're not technically eliminated. The Big 12 put out a graphic, and there's still, like, 10 teams in contention with 3 weeks to go somehow, and they're part of that mix. But, yeah, they've been hurt bad with the health part of this whole equation, and that was just a really good win by Kansas, although Iowa State did make it interesting there at the end. They got Cincinnati now at home. Playing at home, they lost there 2 weeks ago to Texas Tech, so I think that they should win this game. I do think Cincinnati will give them a run for their money, but, yeah, they've lost a lot of steam for sure.
So, yeah, they have. And, boy, that's why you also enjoy what you have when you have it with your Iowa State. I know that your heart got into it, the emotions, but enjoy what you were, and you could still finish very strong, which could be the first ever 10-win team. From Iowa State to Kansas State, the 2 losses in the Big 12, this is there's somebody waiting for Colorado to burp or for BYU to go into a free fall if that was going to happen. Chris Klieman and his team, they've kind of been under the radar. I had the week off, and then, of course, the week before that lost to Houston. And they were blitzkrieged by BYU earlier this year, and that's still a big-time win for BYU. But K-State, Paul.
K-State, this is one of the, best games of the week against Arizona State. They've got a team who's an upstart, and – if you're Kansas State and you want to say, like, hey, who's been in this conference longer? Who's, trying to run the show? It's us. You gotta put them down. It's going to be tough, though. This is going to be if you like running the ball, this game's going to be a really fun one to watch, which, I think if you don't like running the ball, it's still going to be a fun one to watch because these are two teams that kind of mirror each other in what they like to do first. Avery Johnson, one of my favorite players on one side, and then Cam Scatterby, who said I love on the other one. So it's, you kind of slow some momentum down of Arizona State. They're playing really confident now, and Kansas State can't let the fact that they're kind of on the outside looking in get them down. They still got a shot. Much like Iowa State, look, just go win the games, and it could work out for you.
Winning works for you.
Yeah, winning works.
Kansas State has not lost at home. Their 2 losses were on the road, but they have not lost at home, and that's where they play this weekend.
Yeah, I want to talk about K-State. I'll say this about Iowa State, too, that I didn't add, that they lost. Both their losses are close games. I mean, they had to rally majorly in that Kansas game to make that look respectable, but they gave themselves a chance at the end. That could have been a blowout the way that was going for a majority of it. And then, obviously, the other very, very close loss that they suffered against Texas Tech at home. That was a stunner there at the end. But I think Kansas State's had a couple of weeks to prepare for this game, so they ought to be in a good spot, ought to be as healthy as you can be at this point late in the season. And I like a lot of what we've seen. They're not a finished product in terms of, Avery Johnson still has a lot of room to grow. They still got a lot of areas where they can be better, play at a higher level. It's been kind of a roller coaster in certain weeks for this Kansas State team, but I think you really like their chances this weekend against a very good Arizona State team. But I do think Arizona State, if you want to pick them apart, you can say, well, they haven't necessarily played the very best teams in the league. Well, now we're going to see them get matched up with one of what I still think is the very best teams in the league in the Wildcats. So I'm very much looking forward to this one. I think playing at home definitely helps. I think having an extra week to prepare definitely helps. I think just on paper being the better team leans in your favor, and so I like Kansas State in this spot, but I am very intrigued by the matchup itself. I think they'll be 8-2, and I think that will, continue to just kind of hope for some chaos around them to maybe get that backdoor entrance into the Big 12 championship game, even though time is running low. But they have ASU at home, Cincinnati at home, and then they'll have the big trip to Iowa State at the end of the year. Who knows what that will hold, but in order to make that game as important as you possibly can, you got to win this one first. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this Styles matchup, and I do think Scatteraboo versus that K-State defense ought to be a lot of fun.
We go now to West Virginia. We just talked a lot about them, so we don't have to get too deep, but we'll have our opinions on them. The Mountaineers also 4-2 in the conference. They have 4 losses, and until Pittsburgh fell like a concrete brick in water with their losses recently, they lost to what is Penn State, top 10. Iowa State was in the top 25. At the time, they were 11th, lost to K-State, still in the top 20. And then, of course, lost to Pittsburgh, who was. So they've got one of those schedules like, who were the teams when you lost to them? But they've kind of put themselves back in a position by winning on the road, which is hard in this conference. Teams do it, but winning at Arizona and winning a close game at Cincinnati, and here are the Mountaineers still not quite done.
Yeah, look, they've pulled their head up out of the ground and are starting to win here. And look, Baylor never won up there, so
0-6.
They've got that going for them. I've already said in my prediction. I think Baylor's on a roll. I think they do shake that monkey off their back, but they're going to have a heck of a time of it just because I don't know if it's the altitude or the rowdiness or whatever. They just have never won there, but, more power to West Virginia if they can get it done and get themselves, stay on that right track because both these teams are entering feeling pretty good about themselves right now.
There's Twilight Zone up in Morgantown for them.
I think Tony Caridi brought up a very valid point about the schedule. Their 2 recent losses are both the top 25 teams. So you went and you played Iowa State and K-State. The bad part about that was you lost both your big opportunities, which is the big bitch for West Virginia fans is, okay, win 8 games, but beat somebody that matters, right? And especially
those
when
losses at home to Iowa State.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
And especially when they're at home.
I'm sorry.
Especially when they're at home. And, I think that they're a good team. I think that the quarterback situation with Garrett Green is something that I feel like he might get a chance to play this weekend. But then again, he makes it sound like it's a matter of Green having to kind of prove himself as well in addition to the injury. So that's interesting. I know it's been exciting to see Nico Marchiol just get some time in the saddle, even though there's doubts about, his future because what if Neil Brown goes and this and that, but they're in a nice spot to win 3 games in a row. They're at home. They've had this massive amount of success against Baylor in Morgantown, and I don't think Baylor's some team, even though they're riding a hot hand, that you feel like they're, you have to play perfect to beat them. I think this is a winnable game from the West Virginia perspective. And, yeah, if you suddenly win 3 in a row and you're sitting there at 6 wins, that's a big check mark on the to-do list. And you've got, 2 more games out there to potentially get to 8-4 like Tony was talking about. So I think the big thing with them is, we got to, it's like what he kept saying at every end. It's you got to watch it play out, right? To try and go well, what's going to happen with Neil Brown? We got to see what the next 3 games hold, because that's really what's going to determine it as much as anything else. But I think they've got a good chance at a win this weekend. They should feel confident about that. And then as far as the future itself goes, let's just see where this next month takes us. But, yeah, it's a hard team to peg because they haven't been overly impressive. They've lost to really good teams. And they're just kind of sitting there in that weird purgatory, almost like their geography in the Big 12, of where they're not really kind of connected. They're just kind of floating out there, and I don't think anybody quite knows what to make of the entire situation with West Virginia and their trajectory. But, yeah, they're a solid team.
Fourth quarter and Kansas. You look at their record, and yeah, they had the 5-game losing streak and then lost to K-State a couple of weeks ago. I just looked at a few of their losses. They led TCU in the fourth quarter, lost. Led fourth quarter against UNLV, lost. Led in the fourth quarter against, I believe, it might have been Arizona State, and lost. And I didn't get a chance to look at all of them. They're a lot. It's one of these teams, to me, they're a lot better. Now, they've been a mess at times. They are a heck of a lot better. They just haven't been able to finish games. But they just mauled Iowa State. That score was not as close as the score looked, as indicative as it was. And if Jalen Daniels has some magic back, who knows? They lost by 2 at K-State. Maybe they're a lot better team despite their record.
Maybe they are. They haven't finished games. They started to finish them. But, the only game that they'd lost, that was 2 scores was TCU, and they were leading that game late in the third quarter before they let that one go. All the rest of them, they were leading in the fourth quarter and let it get away. They had an offense that you would think, with the running backs they have with Jalen Daniels, could put games away. They weren't able to do it. They've got to win their next 3 to get to a bowl game. The last couple weeks have them looking up, and Jalen Daniels looks like Jalen Daniels, but they've got a tough one this week. So they've got BYU, and but there's a reason that BYU isn't like this massive favorite in a game, 9-0 versus 3-6. It's that BYU plays close games. They win close games. Kansas loses close games. That's the difference in their season. So if Kansas wants to, put another dent in the Big 12's title hopes or Big 12 playoff hopes, then go ahead and win this weekend and close another one out. But BYU's been way better at that than they have.
Yeah, KU's just playing better lately, and they're also finishing. I mean, it's not like some big dramatic turnaround. I mean, they've won a game in a row. So it's not like there's been this crazy wave of momentum, but they've won 2 out of their last 3, and obviously should have won that K-State loss. So even in defeat, you feel like they could be on a really great run if luck was in a different way for them. But I think they'll give BYU plenty of a test. I just don't really trust too many teams going and having to play that late night game, sit around the hotel all day, as we've heard many teams talk about what a just disadvantage or what a home field advantage that is for BYU to have those late night games out in that time zone. So I think that'll certainly favor the Cougs. But if KU can avoid any body clock issues or boredom issues or anything like that, they are playing with a hot hand, and they could go make things interesting in Provo, especially if Jalen Daniels is going to continue to play like the Jalen Daniels everybody was hoping that we'd see from the very outset of this season, and why Kansas, along with what was thought to be at the time a pretty easy schedule, but has turned out to be the opposite of that. But we thought they'd have a favorable schedule. We thought Jalen Daniels would be great. Neither of those things have come true, but now Jalen Daniels is playing better. So if that's the case, then they've got a shot in all these games. But, yeah, at BYU is going to be a tough one. I would not put money on the Jayhawks pulling this off, but there is a part of me that's tugging me going like, no, definitely keep an eye on this one. This could get really interesting with the way they've been playing of late. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to this game.
I saw some in the chat feeling like KU could blow it up for BYU.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree.
Illinois, okay, here are their losses. They led 17-13 against Illinois entering the fourth quarter, lost. They led 20-16 against UNLV with 11 minutes left and lost. They led West Virginia 28-17 with 5 minutes left in the game and lost. They were down 28-27 against TCU entering the fourth quarter. They led Arizona State by 3 with 2:04 to go and lost. And they led K-State by 4 entering the fourth quarter, gave up a couple of field goals and lost. Even the 11-point loss to TCU, that game was 28-27 entering the fourth quarter.
I've been saying for a couple of weeks now that they've got the most brutal schedule in the country when it comes to the games they've lost. I don't know anybody that's lost more heartbreaking games. You might have teams that have lost a couple of them, but they've had like a handful of those games that one or two plays goes differently. You could say, yeah, they win that game. And so they're not that far away from already being bowl eligible and being in the Big 12 title race. And, I don't think that they would be necessarily 8-1 right now. I'm not like saying they're that much better than their record indicates, but I do think being at like 6 wins is definitely something that could have happened if they a brush of luck accidentally bumped up against them at some point during this season, which has not happened. So, they should have beat what was that? I was thinking K-State. Yeah, they should beat K-State 2 weeks ago. I mean, that was there for the taking. So they're not far off. That would have been back-to-back top 20 wins. So I agree with those in the chat. I think BYU's got to be on upset alert this weekend. I'm not predicting that. I think BYU wins the game, but I think if they play with their food, Kansas is explosive enough. If Jalen Daniels protects the football, he doesn't fumble late like he did against K-State or some of the dumb interceptions. Like if he's playing like the old JD6 with that running game and just kind of the mojo they're riding right now, I think that they could make it interesting this weekend, even with the inherent home field advantage that the Cougars have.
Here's the issue with KU. They have 2 of their last 3 games on the road, at BYU this weekend, at Baylor to close it out. They have not won a game on the road. So they got to break something there, just like Baylor's going to try to win for the first time in Morgantown.
Yeah, look, they're very much more a team that if you look at them, except for, about 30 total minutes of their season, when you look at those fourth quarters and how late they were, they're much more a 6-3 team than a 3-6 team.
No, I agree.
Like if you just,
but isn't that the case in the Big 12?
Yeah, it is. But if it was like one of those, it was like a redacted form, you'd be like, oh man, this team's probably that. And if you unredact, you'd be like, oh well, no, there's the details we needed.